philanthropic capital has to be catalytic.
Today I have Priya Naik with me. She's the founder and CEO of Samhita.
As a country, we're bombarded with these large numbers. But who are you delivering for at scale, right? Ultimately, it is that one person. Why does your istriwala continue to have just those 2 istris? Because nobody is giving him money to buy the 7 more. Banks want to lend to these people, but don't lend to them. Small amounts of philanthropic capital actually unlock a very large amount of government guarantee, which in turn unlocks a very large amount of lending.
What gets people to return the grants?
We don't expect you to give the money back, right?
Oh, wow.
You want to give it back, you can. If you don't want to give it back, you don't have to. Whatever you want.
But what's the catch? I mean, it sounds too good to be true. Hello, and welcome to EI Dialogues. My name is Pranav Kothari, and I'm the CEO of Educational Initiatives. Our mission is to see a world where children everywhere are learning with understanding. EI Dialogues is our endeavor to bring conversations that are typically held behind closed doors, to bring out the why, the what, the when, the where, and all the secret sources that have led organizations to scale under their illustrious leaders. Today, I have Priya Naik with me. She's the founder and CEO of Samhita. Priya is a numbers lady, if I can call it that. She was an accountant. She started a PhD in economics. She worked at the JPAL before founding Samhita. And I want to ask her all the economic theories that have led people to give, that have led people to give back, that have led people to pay it forward. I want to understand from her what's the role of philanthropic capital, and are there ways that it can leverage available government policies and schemes and fundings? And does that, in turn, have a domino effect on market-based solutions? Having grown up in a business family and having done an MBA, I've always been passionate about market-based solutions, and we've seen the incredible success of microfinance. So I want to ask her, are there ways that this can be applied towards others? I'm also very concerned about generative AI reducing jobs, and so I'm going to quiz her on is entrepreneurship the way out, and what does it take for someone who doesn't have access to capital to become an entrepreneur? Welcome to EI Dialogues, Priya. It's a pleasure having you here.
So
Thank
good
you
to be
for
here.
coming. Yeah. Priya, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what led to you founding Samhita. What were some moments? If you reflect back on your childhood, other moments at work, paint us a picture of why you do right now what you do. What led you to it?
So, Pranav, when I was 5 years old, I was out in a park with my dad and my mom. And my mom was trying to force feed me like every mother does. And I was refusing to eat. And in that moment, I remember my father took my hand and he took us to the edge of the park. And right beyond that was a slum with a bunch of kids playing. And he said, look at them for a minute. And so I did. And he said, that could have been you, right? And I think as a 5-year-old, I didn't fully grasp the role of luck. But then as I grew up, it just became so real. So I grew up in the Middle East, and you're driving from an air-conditioned home to an air-conditioned school and back. And so every time I came to India over the summer, it would just hit me very hard. And I don't think as a 9, 10, 11-year-old, I could explain to my parents why I was just so quiet, right? But the sheer unfairness of sitting in a car with all of these kids begging outside, I just didn't know how to reconcile that. And so when I moved to India and I went to college, everyone joined, the Dramatic Society and the Performing Arts Society. I joined the Poor Students Educational Relief Fund, right? And it was personal to me because my father had gone to the same college. He received a scholarship from PSERF, as it was called. And a lot of the reason that I am here is because of the aid that he received, right? So for me, I think just wanting to come back to India and ensuring that everybody, and I know it sounds so hackneyed, right? But that everybody should have not just the same starting point, but the same set of opportunities consistently. Now, what they choose to do with those opportunities is really up to them, right? But the sense of, you really need to present everybody with a continuum of economic opportunities was important. And then I did many things in life. I started life as an accountant. I then became a student. I went to lots of universities, studied a lot. But I think, and then I was a researcher, I was a consultant. I had been to 25 countries by the time I was 25, countries that nobody else was going to, right? Ghana, Cuba, Bangladesh, Cameroon. Not fun places to go, but very important places to go. Because I think it taught me about poverty in a way that all of the books that I read just didn't, right? That it wasn't one reason. It wasn't, it was political, it was social, it was cultural, it was just so many things, right, that come together in different ways in different contexts. And so I think I was always very clear that whatever I did was going to be about ensuring these economic opportunities for all. And so Samhita, interestingly enough, when I moved to India, I didn't want to start an organization. I remember going to somebody and saying, why don't we just have an organization that unites the different intermediaries? Because shouldn't you have a mechanism that stitches together really the best of Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar? And back then, everybody laughed at me. And that was fine. I was in my 20s and ambitious and naive. And so Samhita was started as a way to say, could we actually bring Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar together? And then today, for example, right, the work that we do is bring many, many different organizations in ways that we're leveraging each one's strengths to then ensure that that young person, that job seeker, that worker, that entrepreneur, that farmer really has this continuum of opportunities that they can take step by step, really to move to a path of prosperity.
And why is it so important, this person at the center of the community? Like, what does it entail? And why is it not happening by default? Like, why does it need someone like you to make it happen?
I mean, look, I think, as a country, I feel like we're bombarded with these large numbers, right? You need to solve for these 7 to 8 million young people that are coming. And so for some time, there was a lot of pressure to say, hey, but you have to deliver at scale. But then ultimately we said, but who are you delivering for at scale, right? Yeah. Ultimately, it is that one person. And as long as you solve for that one person, you can then solve for the many millions as long as the system that surrounds the person comes together. So why is it important? Because it's important for me that every individual is able to double their incomes within 3 years, right? You have to beat inflation. You really need that pathway to prosperity. It's also blindingly obvious that that pathway to prosperity means that schools have to deliver education. The healthcare system has to intervene when healthcare is needed. It means that employers have to be there. It means that banks have to be able to lend to people if they need access to money. It means government services have to come together. And today, I feel like India is sitting in this historic opportunity where there is not just a sense of urgency, but you have extremely well-developed institutions who actually care about that individual. And it could be enlightened self-interest, which you should leverage. You also have a digital public infrastructure, which is unlike any in the world. And so for the first time, you have intent, you have institutions, you have resources, you have technology, all coming together to hopefully transform the life of every Indian, right? And the question then is, how do you stitch it all together so that 3 things happen? That the individual gets the maximum value, that every partner who's involved, the school, the community, the bank, the employer, et cetera, see very clear self-interest. They have to make money. They have to really see that profit, right? And as long as you can solve for that, that happens. And then the third is, you also have to create a mechanism so that it can scale, right? So it's not then left to one Raju here and one Asha there, that you then have the ability to then add the 1 million or the 10 million, right?
And you would measure success basis their income. Are there any other yardsticks on which you would measure improvement, success beyond income?
Yeah, so we thought about this long and hard, right? And I started my career at the Poverty Action Lab. So everything in my life is about outcomes, right? And ideally irreversible impact. And so we said, hey, maybe we want to talk about, jobs created. We want to talk about people who receive loans or certain skilling measures. But we talk to people, and ultimately they want more money in their hands.
Yes.
And so we said, everything is in service of an increase in income, because that's tangible, that's very real to the student, his or her family, their workforce, etc. And then it holds us accountable for success, right? Then we're not hiding behind numbers like we skilled X number, or that, we reached Y million. I mean, those in my mind they're nice.
Yeah.
They're not transformational.
So very inputs oriented, whereas this is also an outcome in a way that someone is valuing, right? Because income is not like how much am I getting as a dole out or a universal basic income. This is like my skills, how I'm able to monetize create value which someone else is willing to pay me for it. Priya, is it possible that everything is market linked and outcome based? When we are trying to improve the income of a person, it tends to make certain assumptions of what opportunities are out there. And I don't know, with generative AI coming in, it almost feels like jobs are going to go down. So how does one sort of look at this in the context of enabling conditions to get a person from a place of abject poverty, like the students and the girls you saw when you were 5, to a place where they're independent earners? What are all the pieces that have to line up for us to achieve that?
That's a great question, right? And what we've done is really just simplified it to 4 things. Let's just assume that there are 2 pathways, and I'm going to make it ridiculously simple, right? So either somebody wants to enter the workforce or they want to become an entrepreneur. Hypothetically, assume that those are the 2 ways you make money, right? If I want to enter the workforce, what do I need? I need a certain level of education and skills for me to enter, but there has to be a mechanism for it to consistently get better, right? Otherwise, I'm going to stay in a job that's not going anywhere. We don't want a maid to be a maid forever, right? And so how do you make sure that she's consistently improving her skill sets? The second is you do need access to capital, right? Because the reality is every training institute now costs money. And a lot of the people that we work with are first-time formal job participants, which means their parents typically have been laborers, have worked in homes, have driven rickshaws, and so on and so forth. No one's giving money to them, right? Yeah. And so how do you ensure that children with aspirations to study further, improve their skills, have the ability to get the capital to invest in themselves? 3, you need access to better jobs, right? India is very rapidly pushing towards formalized jobs. And so you want to ensure that people have, not just formal jobs, but aspirational jobs that consistently get better. And then last but not the least, that you have some sort of a security blanket, right? So government schemes play a very big role. So when we bring the 4 things together, and when you line them up in front of individuals, take Alia, for example, right? So let's say Alia wants to be a fashion, maybe she wants to be part of a salon, right? Hypothetically. Now, she needs the skills. She needs the skills in the beauty trade. Maybe she wants to become a manager, and therefore she needs managerial skills. She needs money to be able to get access to this other set of skill sets that she needs. Maybe she needs money to relocate so she can go to Bombay and Delhi and earn more money. And so how do you ensure that at every step of the way, depending on her current aspirations and future aspirations, you're lining up skills, career progression, mentorship, access to capital, access to government schemes, right? So that she can continue to sort of move forward. And therefore, the ability to bring this all together is important. And yes, I think the question that you asked, which is, but aren't there other metrics which are softer, agency, decision-making? Those are all things that we measure. But ultimately, it translates into, does she have more money in her hand? Does she have control over that money? Does she have control over her future? Yeah. When she gets married, does she get to come back to work if she so chooses to? Right. If she has to be a caregiver, is she able to balance both, right? And so how do you systematically create that opportunity set as she moves forward? So yes, we do measure a lot of the interim outcomes of decision-making, agency, choice. But ultimately, she wants more money. She wants a better job, right? So
I completely understand how Alia's income needs to grow, and the ability to jump orbits, will be the most sustainable way for Alia to live a productive life, and this will cascade. I'm curious to know, who should pay for it? Should Alia be taking a loan? Should Alia be getting a grant? So can you help me understand, walking me through, what exactly, how would money come in, where it would come in, and where it would come out?
So the right answer is not this or that. The right answer is a blended finance continuum, right? If Alia is the daughter of a sanitation worker, I would lead with a grant. She just needs money. She's not going to be able to repay it. No one's going to give her a loan. And therefore, whether the grant comes from the government or it comes from a philanthropic donor, that's what she needs to take the next step, right? And maybe when Alia becomes competent enough to, let's say, have her own job, and let's say she wants the next skill, maybe she gets a returnable grant, right? And maybe we then say, hey, here's money, go get yourself upskilled, but we know that you have the ability to pay the money back. And by the way, when you pay the money back, it helps somebody else and somebody else. And then now that you've done this, now that you're no longer faced with abject poverty, and you've shown the ability to take money, improve your own economic status, pay the money back, the next time maybe you get a loan, right? So Pranav, I think the simple answer is the right instrument for the right person at the right time. And as long as you have a continuum, then you can say people that are better off should actually get loans, and those that are not maybe get a grant or returnable grant, or so on and so forth. And therefore the question is, in a polycrisis in a country as large as India, given that we have all of these aspirations, right, to become Viksit Bharat sooner rather than later, philanthropic capital has to be catalytic, because there is no way that all of the money put together is going to be able to solve the challenges of education, livelihood, employability, entrepreneurship. And so the question that we always ask the limited set of donors that are there in this ecosystem is to say, how do you do the most with your money, right? Where do you make governments more effective, more efficient? How do you make private sector work for people like Alia, who otherwise would have no ability to get a loan? And so how do you play these different kinds of role? Because that is the only money that is flexible and can be high risk. Now, the role of philanthropy is the following, and I'll just give you a few examples, right? And I'm just going to change topics a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship, because that's a very real pathway for a lot of people leaving the education system, right? Our plumbers, our electricians, our artisans are all solo, nano, micro entrepreneurs. They are also job creators. Now, here's a challenge. India has done very well from a microfinance perspective. India has done very well from people like us getting many calls for a loan perspective. But there is a large missing middle. Why does your driver continue to borrow from you? Because no bank will lend to him, right? Why does your istri wala continue to have just those 2 istris? Because nobody is giving him money to buy the 7 more that he can actually buy, right, and invest in. So when we first started looking at if people need to really realize their aspirations, and credit is a very significant gap, then what is the role of philanthropy, right, in that? So it was ironic that banks want to lend to these people, but don't lend to them for 4 reasons. The cost of acquisition is very high. It's hard for a bank officer to go find the istri wala and the sabzi wala and whatever else. The cost of sourcing and servicing is also very high. How are they going to take the loan and repay the loan? Second is they don't know how to underwrite their businesses, because what if he just disappears tomorrow? There isn't really a fixed establishment. I don't know how to underwrite an artisan's business because they're only selling 4 times a year. There is a real risk, right, that this person's going to default. And the fourth is, but their business itself is fairly risky. And how do you ensure that the business risk goes away, not just the default risk? So both ability and willingness to pay. And so here's what we've done, right? We raised some philanthropic money to create a credit guarantee only for new to credit borrowers, because here is the irony of it. Banks always want to lend to people who already have a credit history.
Or who don't need it.
Who don't need it, right? So hypothetically, you've taken 3 loans, you've always repaid it. I have never taken a loan. Given a choice, the bank is always lending to you, right? And so you have to create an incentive for the bank to actually lend to people, particularly young people who have no credit history at all, right? They're just getting out of school. And so we're doing the following, right? We're using philanthropic capital, a little bit of it, to actually source and make people credit ready. Hey, Alia, you've been working in a salon for a while. Do you want to set up a salon of your own? If so, then how much money do you need? How will you use it? Will you be able to repay it? How will you fill the loan application? Will you be able to make digital payments? Because all of that then makes you a viable customer. We then actually work directly with banks to connect them to borrowers. We use philanthropic credit guarantees and we combine it with government credit guarantees. So interestingly, the government has a 90% risk cover that they offer to a bank for women entrepreneurs like Alia. But banks will always lend to women who have taken a loan before, which is not very helpful for someone like Alia. And so the philanthropic credit guarantee sits on top of a government credit guarantee and becomes a sweetener. And plus, we ensure that Alia actually gets not just the loan, but that she has the skills to run a salon and to be a better hairdresser. So both the trade-specific skills and the entrepreneurship skills. She typically gets government schemes and services. We also link her to markets and customers. So she is actually a really good bet. Now, in this equation, typically what we see is small amounts of philanthropic capital actually unlock a very large amount of government guarantee, which in turn unlocks a very large amount of lending. And we will see anywhere between a 500 to 1,000x leverage. Right?
That's amazing.
Now, not only is the leverage interesting, there are a few things at play. This is the first time that a woman who otherwise would systematically be left out of the workforce and out of business and out of the formal sector is now able to enter it. Once she enters it, nothing can hold her behind, right? Because she has the drive and the ambition to succeed.
Yeah.
What we also do is this is market-based. If one bank has been able to lend to 50,000 Alias and find that she's actually a really good customer, then can we take that information very rapidly to the next 200 lenders so every lender feels comfortable?
Yes.
Can we leverage government guarantees and ideally nudge governments to say, why don't you formulate better guarantees that are much more sharply focused on solving the inclusion gap that otherwise won't be filled, right? Yeah. So you're making Alia a customer and not just an entrepreneur, but hopefully a job creator. You are influencing multiple financial institutions to deploy billions of dollars of lending to a segment that they want to fund, but believe is high risk. You're able to catalyze a very significant amount of government resources that already sit there, not even asking for new money to be put in. And you're ensuring that Alia now has the skills, the capital, the market linkages, and the government schemes to succeed, right? So what you've created is a simple model that brings together Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, keeps Alia at the center, leverages a very significant amount of money, and creates irreversible change.
Yeah.
A bank will now continue to lend if they think that Alia is a safe bet.
Sounds like a fairy tale. Why can't we do crores of them?
So it is happening as we speak, right? We've deployed 3 credit guarantees, one with Seva, one with Hugro, and one with Vara. We funded different kinds of women entrepreneurs. It's a 25 crore portfolio, a small step to begin with. We have seen 4 defaults, 4, right?
That's outstanding.
Which is next to nothing, right? We're partnering with CGT MSC, which is the government's credit guarantee trust for micro and small enterprises. We are working with multiple institutions, some of India's largest banks, and we're bringing it all together in a way that Alia, Asha, Ram, Ramesh, right, always remain at the center of all of the design that we are creating, but we're not only solving for her, we're solving for the government, we're solving for the bank, and in ways that they don't have to change behavior. Right? But having shown them the pathway to optimize on what they are comfortable with in terms of a risk-reward ratio, nothing's going to hold them back now, right?
But what's the catch? I mean, it sounds too good to be true. Is there any downside? You mentioned there isn't a default risk, which I think we've also understood from the microfinance pieces and other work that's been globally published. But is there something to the story that we should all know? What's the other side of the coin?
The catch is, it's hard to find funders who are going to take the time and effort to understand the nuances of this, right? Yes, it sounds great, but there is painstaking work involved in the background, right? You have to source the right set of people. You have to make sure that they want loans. You don't want to create indebtedness. You have to get the right kind of lenders. You have to co-create products that work. And you've seen this, right? A lot of the funders that we know typically want to fund the most intuitive stuff, right? Why do we fund benches and fans as opposed to improvement in pedagogy, right? Why do we fund, medical vans instead of improving healthcare systems? Because it just seems so easy.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it just takes work.
Yeah.
Right?
But it also sounds sexy, and some people want to give to areas and causes that are complicated because it's different and it's not just inputs like vans. No? So this fits that bill. It sounds like a nice romantic dream. Why do the funders not want to do that?
So I'm just going to be fairly simplistic in this, right? Let's say 3 categories of funders, right? There's H&Is. The reality is, and I know you've covered this in your past podcasts, India is just coming into wealth. And the people making that money are so busy continuing to make it and grow it that the bandwidth to actually think about solving complex problems is limited, which is ironic given that they have solved incredibly complex problems to make their wealth, right? But it's just how it is, right? They have very limited time to invest in this. Take a look at CSR, so 25,000 crores. But CSR, unfortunately, follows a 1-year timeline, not realizing that you can still plan for 3 to 5 years, even though you write the check for 1 year, right? But you need evolved CSR heads. They also need a very supportive legal, financial, board, HR, marketing support internally. CSR managers, and we work so closely with so many of them, get between 10 to 20 minutes 4 times a year. Are they going to be able to explain not just the story, but the numbers behind it, the risks?
No chance.
Right? No chance.
If you were in charge of drafting the new CSR law, what would you do?
So I think 2 key changes, right? One, I would go back to how CSR was originally anticipated. We want the private sector to use their creative energy to solve complex social problems that we have not been able to solve alone. You want them to be an equal co-creation partner, right? Bring your technology, bring your expertise, bring your networks, bring your marketing heft to solve all of these complex problems that we wrestle with, right? And second, please let them take the credit. If they don't look fantastic, right, why would they continue to do this? We should applaud them as co-creators and champions because that's how that world works, and we should give them what they want.
Is there a way to put like a positive incentive to do more risky things with the CSR budgets? It feels like right now, just complying to the law, taking the lowest common denominator, funding the benches and the vans is the most stress-free way of being compliant to the law. Like someone who's going to take something more complicated isn't getting any more brownie points, but is on the risk of being a scanner.
Yeah, so let's separate those 2 out, right? What I just described is not risky. I mean, what kind of a default number did I just talk about? It's 0.00.
I mean, convincing your CFO, convincing everybody.
So that's complex. It's not risky.
Okay,
right?
Fair, I understand correctly.
I think to go to companies and say, hey, this is really bereft of any risk.
Yeah.
Yes, it has additional complexity built in. And then I think that we need to do the heavy lifting, right? So I'll give you an example. When all of us saw those migrants, pack their bags and walk the long walk home, one of the things that we introduced was a returnable grant. Because we said, people have just lost their livelihoods, right? They don't want charity, they want dignity. And we said, let's just put money into the hands of people and let them decide what they want to do next. They want to get a new skill, a new job, they want to start a new business. They want to repay a loan, you do what you want. And this was CSR compliant, it was FCRA compliant. And a lot of the people who we co-created it with, by the way, said, no way anyone's giving you the money back, right? So today, if I distributed money to everyone here, and I came back a year from now and I said, remember the money that I gave you? There's no way of giving it back to me, right? We've now done this with 60,000 people. They have been job seekers, farmers, artisans, carpenters, painters, all kinds of folks. We've done this across 50 partners, public sector, private sector. We've done it with 16 funders, 90% repayment rate, right? Now, the reason I'm giving this story is when we put the Returnable grant together, we went to multiple funders. And I mean, if you followed the DIB evolution in India, it's incredibly hard, right? To have 16 funders within 2 years funding a new to the market instrument in the middle of COVID with so many other demands from your money was unthinkable. But why did it work? It worked because we had Naushid Dadrawala, who's incredibly well known, come in and certify it as being CSR, FCRA compliant. We had KPMG, which gave a lot of finance and legal folks within the CSR teams a lot of comfort. We made it super simple. We dumbed it down. We conveyed not just the simplicity, but the efficacy behind it. And so I think it's work that we need to do, right, as a sector. The CSR manager already has a lot of other things that they are juggling. They have those 10 minutes. Do they really want to spend the 10 minutes explaining your idea? Do they own the idea? Are they as excited about it as you are? Have they thought through all of the questions that they're going to get answered, right? And so unless we make it incredibly simple, right, they're not going to be able to take it. So I think to summarize, you want to take away the risk because it's only 10, 11 years old, right? No one wants to fail, right, in the CSR ecosystem. So you want to take away the risk. You want to make it super simple. And you want to make everybody look fantastic, right? If we can do that, and we have to do that collectively, because doing it one organization at a time is incredibly hard work.
Can you help me understand the archetypes of CSR heads, like in those 10 minutes? Like, can you say these are 3 archetypes? This is what the motivation for each of them is. This is what the risk appetite for each of them is.
Yeah, so again, just to be very, very simple, right? There's a compliance-oriented CSR head, and it's not their fault, right? They are sitting in financial institutions or other organizations that are very tightly governed, right? And therefore, they have to stay very squarely within the regulation, but yet there are ways to ensure that you can innovate within the very tight framework of compliance. There are those that ultimately are responsible for stakeholders, right? People that sit outside their factories, an extended supply chain, and so on and so forth. And they obviously have to care about communities that their businesses are then codependent on, right? And then you have those that are willing to really fund the high impact evidence-based initiatives. And therefore, if we can figure out who is the CSR person, what are their set of priorities, challenges, who are their stakeholders, then actually taking complex, potentially risky bets that require co-creation is not that hard as long as they're walking that journey with you. I think the challenge is a lot of times it's us versus them, right? And if they can think of the work we do as their work, if this is their flagship, if this is their metric of success, then they are really co-creating, co-solving, co-innovating with you.
Priya, what goes on in the minds of people when they return a grant, right? Presumably, as an individual, profit maximization theory would suggest to just run away. But you're talking about 90% plus returnable grants. Is there something that's hard-coded in our brains? Is it the psychology? Is it peer pressure? Like, what gets people to return the grants? Especially when it's not part of, let's say, a self-help group like microfinance, right? These are individuals where presumably no one is watching. Why do they return the money?
So I'm going to tell you a story, and we've actually run experiments to figure out why do people pay the money back, right? So this is 2021. We were in the middle of the second wave. I was looking at the returnable grant portfolio, and there was one portfolio that was giving back 103%. And this is a few weeks after we had announced across the board to every partner, every cohort, to say, we don't expect you to give the money back, right?
Oh, wow.
You want to give it back, you can. If you don't want to give it back, you don't have to give back whatever you can, whenever you can, whatever you want. And so we're looking at this data. By the way, our returnable grants are continuing, right? Even though we've announced moratoriums, money is coming in. And so I told my team, something's going wrong, right? And so I picked up the phone and I speak to this woman on the other side. And I said, how are you doing? And she just burst into tears. And she said, what do I tell you, Didi? My life is so crap, right? My husband had a factory job. He's lost obviously factories have closed down. He's at home. My kids are at home from school. My mother-in-law is sick. I'm having to do all of the housework, childcare. Plus, because she was a street vendor, she says, I have to go out and sell. I'm afraid of my own safety as well. And she just sobs for 10 minutes. And so I'm quiet and I'm like, I am so sorry, right? And then I said, we gave you that money. Why did you pay it back? And this was on sort of a WhatsApp video, which our partner was facilitating. And the woman just straightens up, right? And she wipes out like her tears and she says, but how can I not give the money back? And I'm just shell-shocked. And she says, when you gave me the money, I was a recipient. When I gave the money back, I was a donor. And so just like you helped me, no questions asked, I want to help somebody else, no questions asked. And I couldn't imagine, how can a woman in the middle of abject poverty, in the middle of the worst time in her life, prioritize altruism over everything else? She wasn't the traditional rational economic actor that all of us read about in school, but she was just showing up with her humanity, right? And this is what we've seen again and again and again. So we're now running these experiments where we say, here's money, you don't have to pay it back, but if you pay it back, it helps somebody like you. Remember the day you received the money and like how it felt? Think about the other person who's going to get the money, right, from you, thanks to you. And we leave it at that, right? And people can decide. And then now, because people who've returned the money can also qualify for a loan, we're now running an experiment to say, hey, if you give the money back, it was only 20,000 rupees. We know you need a loan of 50,000. We could potentially qualify you for a loan because you didn't have to pay it back, but you did. It's a really good sign for the lender. And if you give the money back, we also have market linkages and skills, et cetera, on offer. And so we're running these now to see what we see, right?
Interesting.
But broadly, and I have mixed feelings about saying this. When we give grants to men, the men are like, only 20,000 rupees, but I needed 40,000, right? When we give 20,000 to women, they're like, 20,000? Why are you trusting me? Please give me only 5,000. I don't need this much. When we give the money to men, they tell nobody. When we give the money to women, they tell 6 other women, right? And so now that we're learning how different human beings react differently, we're actually building that into the model itself. If you know that women are going to tell other women, they should become champions, right? And so can we just build that into how we design the program? So it comes back to being very citizen-centric.
Yeah. So I understood there are 2 reasons to give back, right? One is this concept of pay it forward. So in their heads, they're not paying you back, they are paying
somebody else
for the next person. And the second one is like literally creating the first data point on credit history, which is as a positive reinforcement that if you give this back, I might get a loan and I'm on that pathway to unlock more and more financial capital, which is obviously 1,000 times more than the philanthropic capital that's available to them.
That's right. And the reality is that even if money is given to individuals, which it is, it's typically circulated within the same community. So there is a little bit of that social capital. It's typically given through nonprofits who are trusted partners. So there is a relationship that you want to honor. Although we say you don't have to pay it back, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's many
Do you
reasons
literally
for why
say
it
it out
works.
loud? Like you don't have to pay it back?
Yeah, I mean, they have a grant agreement which says
Okay.
it's a returnable grant.
Right.
You can return it if you want to. It's not a legal binding contract.
Priya, one of the challenges I face is people sort of being fixated about how the organization's set up rather than the work we do. So many organizations get interested, excited by our impact data, by our outcomes data, by the fact that we've been at it for 25 years. But so many conversations stop when they ask me, but you're a nonprofit, right? And I'm like, no, we're set up as a company, but we provide the most impact per dollar for your spend. Isn't like when every part of our lives, the watches we wear, the clothes we wear, the phones we use, the computers, the airlines we fly, if everything in the social development sector is run by for-profits, why is it that when it comes to giving, the person needs the other side to be a nonprofit? Is there any merit in this argument?
I mean, I know it's a bipolar response. In addition to all of that, right, I consistently am in these very fancy boardrooms overlooking, sort of the sea and just stunning gardens. And then they say, oh, but you draw a salary. Why would you do that? And I was like, yeah, because, we just solve trivial problems, right, all day. And therefore, of course, we don't deserve to get paid. Obviously, I can't say that, right, because you do want to check at the end of that conversation. But I don't know how to change people's minds, right? But there's a way around it. So when we go to CSR, we just say, think of it as a service contract. If you had to build a hospital or build a school, you would actually hire a contractor to do the infrastructure work, right? Exactly like that for education. You want to see best-in-class services getting delivered with clear evidence of success. You want to see children performing extremely well. It's like a service contract. And in some sense, then you're accountable for quality and you're accountable for impact, right?
Yes.
But I think it's just a gentle nudge.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think what has happened is that the law is misunderstood. And as long as you can present your argument with just maybe an opinion from a very well-known lawyer to say, but service contracts are allowed.
What does the law say when it comes to CSR? Who can you give it to?
I mean, yes, you can give it to nonprofits, etc., but you're also allowed to do service contracts.
Yeah,
right?
you're allowed to run projects of your own. And if you want to build toilets, you're going to engage a contractor. And that also counts towards CSR.
You otherwise, you can give the money to a nonprofit and the nonprofit can contract it with somebody who's a for-profit, right?
Assuming I get over this, the next question is, but what about ATG? What about tax deduction? What about this?
Yeah, so give the money to a nonprofit and the nonprofit can then contract with EI.
But isn't that routing? Is it allowed?
No, it's not routing. So hypothetically, if, let's say, the nonprofit is also adding value to the same project, right? Then it's a project that you're jointly delivering. The nonprofit plays their role and you play yours, and collectively, more children get educated and they do better in school. Right?
It is frustrating, though, that there's less conversation on what the dollar is buying than where the dollar is going.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think, Pran, that's a function of the fact that the CSR person is then accountable to a legal person or a procurement person, et cetera, who don't have the same level of awareness, right? And so I would almost invite them to conferences. And one of the remarkable things I have seen because of the regulation is, I remember sitting in these boardrooms where everybody's talking about sales and profits and whatever else. And suddenly you talk about CSR and you see people not showing up as CFOs and CEOs, but as citizens, right? And so if we just bring them back to the problem that we're solving and then say, hey, we want to work with you to figure out a solution, right? Because you want your child to have the best quality education, so should the 10,000 other kids. And so as soon as you invest them in feeling the problem themselves, then they will be a champion to help you figure a way out. But we never invite them into the discussion. We invite them once everything is done, and we almost behave like they shouldn't care about CSR, but they should, right? Because they are citizens as well.
Yes. And we will live in a society where there will be people around us who will sort of, if we don't sort of ensure that they're successful, it's sowing the seeds for communal violence and...
So recently, actually yesterday, I was talking to one of our CSR partners, and I told her, for the next CSR event that we do, bring your legal and finance guy along. And you don't speak, let them speak, right? And she said, really? Like, you really want to bet on that? And I said, yeah, right? Because if you put them on the spot, you'll be surprised at how they show up. They don't show up as gatekeepers. They don't show up as, here are 6 reasons why I'm not going to pass this, whatever, right? Then they show up as co-creators and co-solvers. But it's to trust that there is humanity in everybody and that they're going to show up as equal participants.
Andrew Ning, who's now, I think, at Baidu, said that the world is full of important and interesting problems to solve. And I wish the people focus on the important ones first. I almost feel like in our work, it's both important and interesting. And at least, I really enjoy the intellectual side, like problem-solving side, the ability to have so much diverse people to bring them together for a good cause. And that's how I have my fun. Of course, and field visits are a great battery charger as well.
Yeah, because it's seeing your impact come alive in ways that you're hoping, right, on that document that you write, and then you see.
Yes.
You see the change, right, really play out.
Thanks, Priya. I think this was a great conversation. I really learned a lot about the importance of how we need sustainable networks for work to flow through, where like understanding how every person wants to earn more money is a universal fact across countries, across religion, across gender, across any boundaries that we have drawn. I was also amazed to see you said catalytic, I'd like to call it domino effect, that $1 of philanthropy can unlock 10 of government, can unlock 100 of market-based models. And sometimes, you just need philanthropy to take the most risk because it will unlock so much other...
Not even the risk. We just want them to be creative.
Yes,
right? That's
creative.
It. Yeah.
Creative.
Because risk is a bad word for a lot of the people that we work with. So, creativity and being interesting is what we should lead with.
And given that there is past data that this isn't risky, we need philanthropy to take on more creative approaches to unlock a lot of things. I learned about the fact that at least, you give me the courage to keep at it, even if you're getting no for reasons being as tiny as that the capital structure of an organization. And the fact that you say there's hope, and let's be embracing why make the CFO or the legal the villain. Let's bring them into the room, let them get ownership, like make them the heroes so that this continues. Thank you for sort of elucidating to us on what money, limited amounts of money, can do to unlock innate human potential that's out there and set them off on paths where they become independent and not dependent on philanthropy.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that if that woman who had no money chooses to give it to somebody that she's never met, right? What stops philanthropists and CSR, who are supposed to give the money away anyway, from doing just that in creative, more humane ways?
Yeah. And on a future note, whenever you discover why people return money, apart from the humaneness and the humanity, I'm very curious with no strings attached as to, that lady who's in the middle of the lowest point of her life. I don't know if I should say moral obligation, or I should say conditioning, or I should say whatever that led to her giving and paying it forward. Not returning, but paying it forward. I thought it was a beautiful story that I'd love to double click on. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. It was great to have you on EI Dialogues.